Hello everybody, I am the chess strategist and this is my first video. I'm starting a Lichess account and I'm going to see how far I can climb up this rapid ladder. I'm going to be playing mainly 10+5 games. I'm also open to any sort of suggestions if you want to play some longer time controls, some shorter time controls. Leave your input down in the comments below. And after the game, we're going to break down the moves I make, and we're going to go over my mistakes and just see how we can improve together. That's kind of the whole goal of the series, is for me to improve, you guys to improve, and yeah, just have a fun time exploring different openings and strategies in chess. I'm rated 1800 on chess.com, so we're going to see what that translates to in Lichess. So let's just jump right into it. And our first game is with the white pieces. And I am going to be playing e4 mainly in the speedrun because I'm an e4 player. I've explored with some d4 and some c4, but I'm not nearly as comfortable with those moves. And we get the symmetrical king's pawn, and many people play the Vienna, knight c3 here, but I like to play knight f3. Mainly I like to go for the Italian opening. We'll see if our opponent allows us. Opponent allows us to go into the Italian by playing knight c6. And we are going to play the signature bishop c4. We are now in the Italian game. And our opponent responds with knight f6. And there's a few different responses here. We can go for the fried liver, which is quite potent, or we can go for the traditional Italian. I like to go for the traditional Italian. We'll play d3. Our opponent plays h6, denying the fried liver, which is very common, especially at this level. And usually I like to play c3 in these kind of positions, or castle. Now, I don't want to castle too early because I don't want to allow our opponent to expand with g5 and start an attack very quickly on the king side when we've castled and they haven't. So we're going to play c3, just a move that you end up making. You want to open the pathway for the queen, and you also want to just be able to play d4 at a timely moment as well. It looks like our opponent has left the game. Okay, they were reconnected. Maybe some internet issues on the opponent's side. Leisure Chess is his name, or her name. And it looks like they've played a few different games. Ooh, 371 games, okay. And they're mainly rapid player. Our opponent responds with d6, which fairly symmetrical response. Now, we want to take the opportunity here to maybe deny our opponent's next move, which could possibly be bishop g4, which is an unpleasant move because it's going to pin our knight and it's going to relinquish some of our control over this crucial d4 square that we want to play d4 eventually. Bishop on g4 would be making this knight not protect that anymore. So we want to play h3 here just to prevent that move. It also takes away the square from the knight, which is nice. And it's a fairly non-committal move. We still haven't committed our king. We want to see what our opponent does. Our opponent goes for an odd move, I think, queen e7. Doesn't seem like it accomplishes very much because the queen isn't really going anywhere from e7 that it couldn't go already. It's kind of just a boxed in queen. It's really just an awkwardly placed queen. I'm not really too scared by his queen placement like that. So I think here there's a few different options we have. One strong option is we could just develop our knight, and we have a few different places we could develop it. It wouldn't be too risky to do that. We could also develop our queen, but I think just developing our knight to it's d2. Knight to d2 is a strong option, and that's our opponent's idea. He wants to be able to play bishop e6 without having to double his pawns, which I think is fine. I'm not super concerned about that. And we could just castle here, or we could play a move I like better. Maybe a move. I don't know. I like queen b3 here. We're threatening this pawn. If he takes, we can take with the knight, and we're still threatening this pawn. He's gonna have to make a weakness in his pawn structure, and I just really like this move. Queen b3 adds a lot of pressure. The only problem is this response here, which I don't really like very much. We could play b4 here maybe. go for b4. I think b4 is a strong move. We want to develop this knight anyways. We're fine with this trade of the light squared bishops. You can see our opponent's getting a little bit of a time advantage over us, but we are playing 10 plus 5. We have 5 minutes or 5 second increment, and we're not really getting low on time. So I'm not super concerned about our time running out or anything like that. I think we're doing pretty okay. Now, I like to do very concrete analysis during my turn, and then on the opponent's turn, sit for a while and think about what our moves might be coming up next, and what just general ideas are strong in this position. So of course the idea of playing d4 is always going to be there, but you hesitate to open up the center, especially when the opponent's queen is in line with our king. So we probably want to castle before we play d4. It might be a little bit too hasty to play d4. And here our opponent has decided to move his queen to a more active square, but I'm not really sure if this activity is actually that good. Now, to me it looks like the opponent could castle either way. Hasn't decided yet. Maybe he wants to put his bishop there and then castle this way. So I'm going to just commit to castling short, because I feel like it's not super dangerous anymore. I'm not worried that much about a kingside attack. Yeah, so that move indicates to me he probably wants to castle to the kingside. And we do have this problem of this dark squared bishop that is not that strong, and we want to get it to a nice diagonal. I'm thinking we could put our bishop on e3 here, and it would be a strong place for our bishop. It is controlling a lot of squares. These key central squares that black mainly has control over, we now can trade pieces if a knight decides to jump onto these squares. Just having control over this f4 square is important. This square is a square that black wants to exploit, and this is the square that we want to exploit, these two squares here, because our strong e4 pawn is guarding these squares. They make excellent outposts for our knights. Okay, so our opponent has decided to castle to the king side, and I think there's a few different moves we have here. We can play very positionally with like a queen side kind of attack with our pawns, and I think I like that idea. a4 and then maybe b5 could be an idea. a4, b5, and since now we're controlling this, we're going to be controlling this square with our knight. This knight is not going to be able to go to that square, so I like the idea of playing a4 and then b5 here. Notice the role of the c3 pawn. The c3 pawn is holding our center, is stopping this knight from invading. So I did miss a tactic here. Our opponent takes our e4 pawn, noticing that taking that pawn would result in us losing our knight. That's a tactical mistake. Well, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to see if I can throw in any intermediate moves. And it looks like I'm going to throw in this b5 move, because I'm seeing this tactical opportunity. If our opponent takes here, I can move here protecting this knight, and then one of these knights is going to be lost. Now, if he doesn't fall for that, then it's not very good. But we'll see what he goes for. And of course, everybody makes mistakes. Totally a tactical opportunity I just missed completely. And we'll go over at the end of the game and see what I could have done better to avoid that. So our opponent has a few different options. I think one of these two moves, knight to b8 or knight to d8, are the prescribed moves. The intermezzo, knight takes c3, does not work because of a few different options for me. Um, Actually, no. There's no few different options. The main option is just queen b3. Queen c2 might work as well. Yeah, so our opponent's taking his time here. I think it's a critical moment in the game where if our opponent goes for this intermezzo, they have to justify it. And okay, so our opponent goes for the intermezzo, and we have a few different options here. Queen b3 is my first option. If I go queen b3 here, I think my opponent wants um, knight to e2, and knight e2 is just not a move that we should be allowing. So I think queen c2 is the appropriate move here. Queen c2, because if knight e2, then queen takes c2. But if queen b3, then there's nothing there, and he gets the nice intermezzo with the check, and he's not losing. He's not losing a piece there. But here, two pieces are attacked. Only one can be defended. I think queen c2 is the only move here. Of course, our queen is attacked, so we're going to have to move our queen no matter what in that turn. So with that intermezzo, it looks like our opponent is most likely going to be giving us a piece back for the two pawns. But we're probably going to lose a pawn back as well, and it's not going to be a terrible trade for our opponent. It'll be slightly advantage for us. So it's still worth looking at that mistake and treating it as one, because yeah, allowing knight takes e4 was just not a move I should have allowed. But I like the way I played it. I think b5 was a good practical choice, although probably not the best practical choice. If our opponent decided to go with knight b8 or knight d8, I believe he would have been completely fine. And it's important to make good practical moves. If you see a move and you understand the way that it works and you understand what you're playing for, it can be a lot better than trying to just think for forever and try to find the best engine move, because you're not a computer. You're not going to be able to find it 100% of the time. Sometimes you will. But most of the time, you should just play chess like a human, and because you're playing a human, you're not playing against a computer. And here, I think I made a mistake. I made a decent practical choice, and our opponent has fallen into it, and now he's realizing, oh wait, one of my knights is lost. So here he decides to go the other way. Now what I would not want to do here is take this knight with my knight or my bishop. That would, first of all, open up the lane for the queen, and it would give him an outposted knight on c3, which is the last thing that I would want. But now I'm seeing there's a fault to this. We might have to do that, because if I take with my queen here, he does have knight e2, earning back the queen. Wow, what a move. Very strong move from our opponent here. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to take with the bishop, then we're going to take with the knight, and the knight will be attacking the queen. When the knight's attacking the queen, um, we will be able to, the queen will have a tempo. He can give this check, but we just move our king, and his queen will have to move along this file, of which there are going to be no squares available. And we should be able to pin the knight. So we're going to take first with the bishop. Take first, take, and he might give this check, which we just step aside. Now once this knight arrives on this square here, there's not going to be a safe square for the queen. This square's covered, this square's covered, this square's covered, this square is going to be, well, covered by the knight as well, and the queen. And this square, of course, I mean, rooks are covering this square. And our opponent goes for queen d5, which is a desperate attempt, but it does allow us to reclaim the knight. It's a valiant effort, and we're just going to reclaim our knight. So now we're up. We have two knights, and our opponent just has a bishop and a pawn, which is a large amount of material. So we should be able to convert this opportunity. Now here he does exploit a pin, which can be dangerous. And he might be able to reclaim a piece here. But let's see if we can finesse this anyway. Alright, so it looks to me like this knight is just completely lost, and we should focus on developing our pieces. I would think we should just develop our rook here, as our knight is just lost. He's going to take it with the bishop or the queen in the next turn. And queen trade is not out of the question for us. Endgames are nice. I like playing endgames. I like how instructive they are, and we might be able to go into one here, down a pawn, which again wouldn't be great usually, but we can see what we can do. We've got this active rook on e1, and we're going to control the file for a second here. We do have this knight, and knights are very tricky pieces in endgames. When your opponent has one bishop and you have a knight, a lot of times you get into time trouble, and knight becomes a menace to deal with. We don't want to have to deal with the knight. We'd rather have the knight. So now we have the knight, and endgame is really not completely out of the question for us. And I have to say, our opponent, Lichess, is playing very well. As we saw earlier, they do have a lot of games, and could be slightly underrated. But I do like how they've been playing this game so far, and kudos to them for playing so well. Wasn't expecting this first game to be such a tough one for me, but we're learning together, of course. And our opponent takes with the bishop. There's a few options we can go for here. I'm quite privy to moving our queen to a square where I feel like it's just more active or threatens something immediately. I do like the idea of playing queen a5 here. And since we're low on time, I'm just going to go for it. Opponent's taking their time. And so we're making a threat on this pawn on c7 here. And we're still controlling the file. Our opponent is most likely going to exchange their knight, or their bishop for a rook, which can be problematic, but they are getting very low on time. And they've thrown in an intermezzo. I think that's a good move. Nice intermezzo for our opponent. And we're just going to play fast because we do not want to get low on time. We want to just keep playing with a lot of haste so that our opponent gets low on time and maybe makes some mistakes. Here I'm going to play queen to f4 immediately. And here we're just going to take the bishop. We're going to trade for this. We're going to get the rook on the file here. And here we're going to just stack our queen and our rook, create a battery. We get full control over the file. Notice how there aren't too many open files, especially for our opponent. We've just got these main two. Now we're going to invade onto the 7th rank with our rook. We're going to earn a tempo on the queen with that. I'm going to see where his queen goes. And our opponent runs out of time. Now, I have to admit, we did not play very well in this game, especially just around hanging pieces and noticing tactics. But I think this is a practical lesson on how you can win a lot of your games. Sometimes when people have a winning position, they get a little bit nervous and they make very slow moves and they throw it away. So here we just play a normal Italian game, make a bunch of common moves. Now there is a different way to play this, which can be good at scoring a quick win, and that's knight g5, also known as the knight attack or the fried liver attack it may develop into. You see there is not that many good responses to this threat right here on the f7 pawn. Main move here in this position is d5, counter striking in the center and forcing this capture. Now a lot of times people don't make the right move here. They just don't understand d5 as the right move. They will use their knight to protect, or they will just not understand what's going on here, and they won't know that that's the move you have to make. So d5, take, and a lot of the time knight a5 is the main line. People also play b5, which is a good move. Knight d4 is a tricky line as well, but most of the time you're going to get knight a5, and then here you give bishop b5 check, c6, d takes, and then there's a bunch of different moves, but this has been the trendy move, bishop d3. A lot of Masters games have gone like this, including games from Hikaru, games from R. Pragnananda against Ju and June. It's been a very trendy line, but we're not playing that today. I want to go over my blunders. My first blunder here was not noticing the threat that my opponent made. My opponent had this threat of taking on e4 as soon as the queen started making contact with the knight, which was on this turn. Opponent was threatening knight takes e4 on this turn, but I didn't capitalize on it. I didn't see it, and I went from advantaged to disadvantaged. And opponent could have taken on e4 a few different times and didn't. Opponent eventually took on e4. Now I want to see what the computer says about my move b5. Computer actually likes b5. It says it's the best move. Alright, so after b5, the best move was knight b8 or knight d8. And knight takes c3 is equalizing. Okay, that's what I was thinking. That these moves are better for black, and this move is not excellent for white, but it's definitely slightly better for white. And we saw that it was better for white in the end. It was practically difficult to play. And there's a few different moves. Queen d2 and queen c2, computer says were both very similar. Queen b3 was not good because of a few different things. First one being knight d4, apparently. Computer says knight d4 just makes queen b3 terrible. So we played queen c2. And e4 would have been a strong move here, according to the computer. Wow. That's a strong resource. Our opponent played move which the computer actually thinks is stronger after thinking. Knight d4, and bishop takes d4, e takes d4, knight takes d4 was the only way forward. Queen d5. And this move, knight f3, would have been the move, according to the computer. Knight f3. Knight f3 would have been the move. And I'm not sure why. Let's see, computer says queen c6. I guess the idea is you want to move this knight preemptively before it gets pinned with bishop f6, which we all know is going to happen on the next move. So I took, which is an accuracy, and bishop f6 is played. And here I think I made a mistake. Rook f1 was the mistake. I should have played knight e3 here, yeah. Knight e3, and force him to take with the queen, and then I get this pawn. And in this position, I'm not down nearly as much. I've got the pawn, and these pawns are very weak. Okay. And rook ab8 would be the best move here. Okay. So and this is fairly equal. Minus 0.3 is not enough to claim the winning advantage. It's just a small advantage for black. And if I was going to play some more accurate moves, then I would have won here. And yeah, so my big mistake was not making that move, allowing him to take with the bishop, where he gets the skewer. And once he gets the skewer, we just have to move quickly here. Opponent ran out of time. Alright, so this is not the greatest game, but it's our first game, and we are going to be improving, getting better every single time. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. I hope you took some lessons away about making moves a little more cautiously and understanding the tactics and the position, how they changed. I think today if I had seen this knight takes e4 idea and made a conscious threat, like I noticed in the game, hey, as soon as the queen is making contact with this knight, this pawn is overworked. And I should have noticed that earlier, and that was one of my main mistakes. The other mistake is I should have noticed, hey, I can't allow him to take with the bishop here. I need to make him take with the queen. and get something in trade. Like I knew this knight was lost, but I didn't think about how can I get the most for the knight. Instead, I ended up allowing a skewer, which gives him another exchange, and then he's most certainly winning in that position. But he ends up flagging, so he wasn't able to capitalize on it. But still, it was a pretty high accuracy game, especially for my opponent. 89% accuracy for my first game. 78% accuracy is not great, but it's all right. So I'm not too unhappy with it, and I'm looking forward to playing another game. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.